My thoughts on the housing crisis. My name is Matty. This is Matty Does Life. This is my first episode, and I'm just talking off the top of my head because that's what people seem to like. So no script. I do have a few notes, but I spent a number of years driving over the road the past 15 years, and I've been in 48 states, driven through cities everywhere, and I know that things are getting worse. I can see it. I can tell by what I see, the people I see on the sides of the roads, and I know that there's this big impetus to people to just kind of give up. I talk with some of the people sitting there on the side of the road, and I don't talk to them while they're sitting there on the side of the road. Instead, I talk to them away from there, or sitting in a fast food restaurant or something, and give them a few bucks and listen to what they have to say, because I'm always interested in I'm interested in people. I'm interested in people's problems. I'm interested in trying to solve people's problems, or at least help them find ways to solve their problems. And man, this is a tough one. This is a tough one because it's something um, where there's always this ongoing calculation that we all do regarding the best use of our time, the best use of our energy. And one of the things that we don't take into consideration is emotional energy, the emotional cost, the cost of just doing simple things like caring. I'm not going to go too much into what I do because honestly, my employer does not allow me to talk about what I do, but in large part, what I do is I sit across the desk from people and I talk with them about things, about their situation, and I want to help them. I want to try to help them get into a better place. And there's a lot of people who are living on the edge, and that's always been the case, right? There's always been a large number of people who are kind of on that nice edge of making it or not making it. And it can be so easy for people who've been in that situation for years to just decide, you know what, it's not even worth fighting anymore. I've been fighting all my life. I've been fighting for to make it, and trying to work within the system, because if I work within the system, then I get benefits from that, right? And I'm not even talking about Social Security or anything like that. I'm just talking about a certain level of security and stability that comes from participating with the system. And that's not always the case. That's not always the case. I have experienced a lot of things in my life. I grew up very middle class. My mom was one of the very few that I knew that was a stay-at-home mom who was able to actually raise a family, and the kinds of things that you saw on TV, that kind of thing. And it wasn't until I was in high school that I realized just how uncommon that had become. And I think that's when I really became aware of the problems that people face. And one of the things the first question comes in my mind is why? Why is it that I had this and other people didn't have this? And that was a question that kind of drove me for a while, and honestly drove me into depression for about 10 years. And and I didn't actually go to college until I was like about 28 years old. And I dabbled, I'd taken classes here and there, tried to do it, but I always came back to, there is nothing that I want to do that justifies spending that kind of time, that kind of money, trying to get a piece of paper so I could work in that for the rest of my life. I never saw that as something that I wanted to do. I never saw that as having an actual value proposition to me. And when it came out that I had a whole bunch of learning disabilities that had been diagnosed, that hadn't kept me from like doing reasonably well in high school. I mean, I was a B average student, and honestly, I didn't even try. And I'm not trying to like brag or anything. I'm just trying to say that just because somebody looks like they don't have issues doesn't mean that they don't have issues. That somebody may have certain strengths that allow them to cover up weaknesses in certain situations. But I went from high school where it was more about reading the textbook and all this stuff, and I could read ahead in the library, and I could come in pretty much knowing already a lot of the things that were going to be talked about, except maybe in math, which kind of reflected my grades, because my grades in math, I think I only passed high school algebra, and I mean first year algebra, by doing an extra credit book report on the Mandelbrot set. I mean, that was like, I could understand that, I could grasp that, but I couldn't wrap my mind around the algebraic theorems. And I've always struggled with certain types of thinking versus other kinds of thinking. I'm great with people. I'm great with systems of people. I'm great with, sitting down and talking with people and understanding, learning where their strengths are and trying to find a place for them, a way that they could use what they have already to enjoy some kind of success. That's kind of what I've always done when it comes to like numbers and hard logic and stuff. I mean, you give me a multiple guess problem on a standardized test, and I can tell you which of those four answers makes sense. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you my brain. If you just gave me something that wasn't half as difficult and told me to solve it and show my work, I would not be able to. But you give me a multiple guess placement test, for example, and I will test far beyond my actual ability to do work, because something in me can just recognize what fits without knowing why it fits. And sometimes that's a big benefit, but most of the time it's not, because you have to actually do the work, right? You have to be able to show step by step. You have to work through things step by step. And that's always something that I've struggled with. And people don't recognize that. They don't see that. They see somebody who just seems to get it, who just seems to understand. And, I don't necessarily understand the basic things that other people pick up so easily. And, and I'm just saying this because everybody has their own strengths. Everybody has their own weaknesses. Everybody's mind works a bit differently. And so what works for one person often doesn't work for another, especially when it comes to things like, looking at opportunities, what they want to do with their life, all this stuff. There is nothing wrong with wanting to pursue what you think is right for you. Everybody wants to funnel you into these little boxes, into these little things. And I am gone way, way, way astray here. But what I'm trying to say is that is that if you do not fit into what we have decided collectively is kind of the success funnel, then it's really, really hard to see the benefit of participating in the system. Because I spent 10 years and chronic depression, going from entry level job to entry level job. I worked with people who had high level degrees, and just for whatever reason they're like, okay, doing what I was doing because they needed a change. And I certainly could sympathize with that, because I was like, yeah, I would never get a degree like that because it makes no sense for me. But uh, but most people that I knew didn't have that kind of background. They didn't have education. They didn't have anything. And but the thing that always ticked me off is my father was a research chemist, right? He was a research chemist. My mom had a college degree, just even though she didn't really use it. But they moved in educated circles, and I'm used to working with people who are educated and are professional, as well as people who might be working in the warehouse or driving trucks or whatever. Um, and yeah, you often do see very different mentalities, because people go on certain tracks based on their experiences, based on their backgrounds, what families they're from. That does play a part in it, but also just kind of, a lot of it is just natural inclination. If those can be very different, divergent kinds of paths, and some people are just more comfortable on one than the other. And the one thing that always ticked me off was this attitude of, oh, I worked my ass off to get my college degree, so I deserve this set of benefits, and I'm going to try to make sure that other people who didn't go down that same kind of path, uh, don't share in it, because this is what I worked real hard for. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, okay, seriously, you went to class, you studied, you did good work, congratulations, but I spent 2 years putting in 12-hour days, 7 days a week, with no breaks, in a warehouse environment. Don't tell me that you worked hard for something, and so you deserve this. A lot of people work really hard, and some of them do get benefits. Some of them do get, but there's a lot of people who don't see anything of that. And those are the kinds of people who are both the backbone of society and also the people who live on that edge. And if they lose that sense of I can get a benefit by participating in the system, if they lose that, if they lose hope that they will live, then why would they participate? Why would they contribute? Why would they not say, you know what, weather may suck, but I can sit out here on the corner, and I can make more money. I can keep more money that I bring in by sitting here on a corner than I do by working in stores, working in restaurants, working wherever. That is what I see a lot of, is this just general apathy and rejection. And we talk about a housing crisis, and that is a big part of it. That is a big part of it, the housing affordability. Because if, no matter how hard you work, you only have so many hours in a day, right? And if taking care of yourself, being able to take a day off, several hours off to go to the doctor and sit there in the waiting room and, do whatever tests need to be done and all that. That for a lot of people is a luxury. And not just, they can get the time off, but they can't afford the time off because it's not paid. Oh yeah, insurance may cover the cost of their visit, but doesn't make up for the fact that they just missed out on 36 or 48 hours worth of take home pay, and because their rent is $1,000 a month, and they have to get to work, and they have to eat, and there are a lot of expenses. But the number one thing, and this is something that I've seen touched on by a lot of people, that there are people talk about, the price of eggs, the price of milk, the rising costs and other things, but taken as a totality, the increase in rents and in housing has outpaced the growth in everything else. And in terms of sheer dollars, that makes a much bigger impact. And if you don't have enough money to buy the brands that you normally buy, but you have enough money to buy a lower brand thing for a week, then you can do that. But you can't do that with housing. That's inflexible. You have to pay the same amount every month, no matter what your expenses are. And I mean, you can change that, but that takes planning. That takes planning ahead. And the things that put people behind aren't things that you can plan against. And I've seen people push the idea that we need to adjust the what is considered affordable for somebody for rent to half their income. And I don't know what it is currently. I know that in the past it was 25% of your monthly income was considered reasonable for signing a lease. But that was what, 15, 20 years ago, something like that. So that number apparently has been revised upwards, because now I'm hearing noise about up to maybe it's okay to extend that up to 50% of monthly income, which is just insane. I mean, all it is people who are in my view, acting predatory. And part of it is, I mean, it's you have to, in order to have something to rent, you have to buy or build it. Which, even if you build, you're still buying the materials, you're still doing that, and you're having to build according to modern business codes. In the neighborhood that I live in, nothing was built according to current building codes. I mean, the lots where I'm at, when the house burns down, that lot is not buildable because they don't fit within what the local code requires for dimensions for housing, for single family housing. So we have as these older houses burn down, we get a checkerboard pattern of the lots are just kind of used as gardens. That's how you have house garden, house garden, house garden, in my neighborhood. And there really isn't a fix for that, because the rules say that you can't build on these lots, which of course in my view, that is a failure of the rules. That means that the rules themselves, they need to be amended. So if a house had previously been built on there, and you're then put another house there, and put in more flexibility regarding minimum lot sizes when when looking at these kinds of situations, but those exceptions aren't being made. And if those exceptions aren't being made, then every time there is a house fire, you lose you lose that you lose that. That's no longer in the housing stock, and everybody else's rents go up a little bit. It's not. It's a failure of the system. And I can understand why there are people who want to burn the system down, because it can be infuriating. These are choices that are being made that don't appear to have taken into account a lot of people's lived experiences. They're built around some ideal, and there isn't any regard for the human impact. And I realize you want to make sure that the housing, that houses are being built appropriately. Well, don't need a 2,500 square foot house in order to live reasonably. You really don't. I mean, I know that's the kind of thinking that people have, that they want, and not just that, but they want because it preserves everybody else's property values. And I guess in my view, I don't care about your property values. Honestly, I really don't. I care about whether there is I care about whether we make room in the system as a whole, for as many people as possible to benefit from that system. Because if we don't, what we end up with is an increasingly large number of people outside the system who have no stake in it. They may still benefit from it in terms of, people who do well within the system give me money, and that's, okay, they benefit indirectly from it, but why are they there? Why is that why is it that I can sit there and say, you know what? I honestly don't think you're being unreasonable, because I agree with a lot of the points that you're making. I can understand why you would make this decision. And that is a serious problem. That is a serious problem, because if we are leaving so many people behind, that's what causes instability. And I didn't mean to make this about riots or anything else like that, but that is a kind of thing that feeds violence like that, because that's something that says, you know what, the system itself, we perceive the system itself as our enemy. And in my day job, I do work within that system, and there are problems within the system. Some of the problems are inherent to it, in that it won't function if certain things aren't done specific ways, and other problems within the system are, in my view, a choice, and it's the ones that are the choices are the ones that we can push on for reform, if there is an appetite for reform. And that's the issue, because eventually, number of people who are apathetic or hostile toward the system are going to reach a critical mass. They're going to reach a critical mass, and then what do we have? We lose what we have. And when we look at the countries that have gone down that road, and I can, and so sometimes I feel, I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's infuriating. I just want to burn it all down. But you look at the places where they burn it all down, and it does not go well for anyone. Anyone. So, I tamp that down. I'm just like, what can I do to help people? Well, this podcast is actually one of the things that I am trying to do to help people, because I'm not just putting myself out here because I want to hear the sound of my voice everywhere. I'm putting out I want the help of people who care. And my big passion, what I'm trying to do, what I've been trying to do for years, is figure out how to provide actual affordable housing for people who don't qualify for a mortgage, who don't qualify for Section 8 housing, who, they're working, they're raising families, and they want to be able to live, and they don't want to, they don't want um, a, they want to stay in the system. They want to stay in the system. And I'm trying to create a space in the system for people like that, so that they're not pushed over the edge. I want kids to have stability. I can't give them the kind of family and the kind of situation that I had, but I can, but if I can help at least a handful of families become more stable, then to me it's worth it. To me that is worth it, and that's what I'm doing. And it's not just this podcast. I started. I have an eBay store that is that's raising money for that purpose. And if you really want to help directly, I have a Patreon, and link to that's going to be in the description of this. Um, it's it's $3 you can join for $3 a month, get access to our community. There's other stages of involvement possible, but it starts at $3, and bonus content that I create each month you get access to, and other some other small perks and all that. But really, what it is throw us $3 a month and help us with our quest on affordable housing, and help us bring more people into the system that benefits all of us. Because if we don't do it, who will? I don't see very many people doing it. There are other people running projects, but I'm the one you're listening to right now, and I appreciate that. You have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening.